which is a Tuesday, and we're focused on a digital world ripple effect. We have a group of folks that are joining us. We'll focus on general review, Q&A, and maybe a topic around economics and questioning why are economics so important and why would people that come out of the health industry talk a little bit about economics. We want to remind you, we've got some hosts. If you have any kind of questions, you're welcome to direct there. There's not a lot of support because it's kind of a closed meeting, but private membership is what this is focused on in the digital world. Some of the things we may talk about may be forward-looking, and we will jump right into a quick little stint here. Some of you may know who this is. I'll give you a hint before we start. He doesn't come out of the financial industry.
This is what we must not let them do. When we lose cash, if we lose cash, and you've only got central bank digital currencies, the computer will know what it is you're trying to do before you even do it, and they will prevent you from doing it. If, for example, they say you can't leave your house more than 5 miles, you try and buy a bottle of water 6 miles from home, you won't be able to. I'm not kidding. So many reasons why you should retain cash. It's offensive that the politicians believe that they have a right to all of your information at all times.
So there's two big things that we're talking about here. One is information and one is cash. So information ties to the individual's identity. And for those of you that know, what we focus on is, especially in the digital world, ties a lot to some of the services around identity, such as, maybe something that you use to identify yourself as a birth certificate or a driver's license or a passport, or maybe a process that you go through, a digital notarization. There's a couple bets, and let's say that this gentleman, literally, let's say that this gentleman understands technology, understands finance, isn't driven by money, and came out of the pharmaceutical industry. So literally imagine an ecosystem where digital is actually adopted. So he talks about hanging on to cash. Well, what if there's a massive war that happens globally, like World War III, and cash is actually worthless? And the new monies that are actually issued are actually digital. What then? And that's why when we talk about these models of centralization versus decentralization, it's really, really important for decentralization to actually have a seat at the table and an option or an opportunity. So I wanted to try and really help folks to understand some of the advancements that we've seen. So when we're talking about systems like different kingdoms that are coming up, the World Health Organization is a party to the vaccination. And this individual that we just talked about, he comes out of the vaccine world. Why would the World Health Organization and a vaccine individual talk about economics? And why would the World Health Organization connect to the World Economic Forum, which I personally had an opportunity to actually go to in Davos? And some of the people that I talked to, crazy as it was, are people that are actually running, chief medical officers from some of the biggest. This gentleman works for Pfizer. Some of the people that I personally met with face to face, not just them, but their spouses and others, ran Johnson & Johnson. And for the longest time, I couldn't understand, why would Johnson & Johnson be at a World Economic Forum in a big way? And then why would other dancing and other hooplas and other videos that I took, which I haven't shared yet, why would they actually be in the real world? And so we're going to discuss why economics, decentralization, and health go hand in hand. We're not going to focus in on kind of a, we won't focus in on, let me see if I'm still logged in here. Okay, so what we're going to do is jump into some of these digital assets. Let's go ahead and come into vehicles. Can someone give me a license plate number again for vehicle and tell me what state it's licensed out of currently? Anybody?
LHL 317,
Let's see.
Hawaii.
So out of Hawaii. Okay. And you said LHL 317? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so this is going to basically look at the existing centralized system, pull in the details associated with it, and then give us the opportunity to actually do a couple things within this ecosystem. So is this the right vehicle here?
That it is, but wrong color.
Wrong color, okay. That's good to know. So imagine the ability to actually pull a vehicle in, know the fair market value of the vehicle, know details around it, maybe if it's been in accidents, if it's been sold a couple times, if it has had financing on it, maybe if it's got a certain number of miles on it. So you can basically get a fair market value for these vehicles. But then what if there's also the opportunity to throw financing at it or to throw insurance at it? And it's automatic. So literally, think about it. You've logged into a system with a scan. You never even provided it your full name, but yet you can start linking physical world objects to something that is represented in a digital form based upon data that is cumulated. Okay, so imagine if you finance it, but think about this in a different way. And what we're going to look at real fast, and we're going to open it up for discussion. We're getting some feedback from somebody that's not. I'm going to see if I can find out where that's at. Getting Charles or Raymond, maybe. But imagine if you have a vehicle and you can actually finance it, but think about it a different way. What's the average lifespan of a vehicle like this? So this Equinox, what do you think? Maybe 200,000 miles, 250,000 miles? And when do we usually get a new vehicle? So when do we actually go and recycle them? When we start looking at some of the average data points, there's what's that?
About 200,000.
So about 200,000.
250s.
And then sometimes you have to replace maybe a head gasket in the engine, and so the car is worth less than the value of the repairs, and so they go through this process. Does anybody know why Toyota is the #1 selling car in the world? And I would say it's because of how we should probably close that. It's how they actually build the vehicles for a long term. What's some of the things that we're go ahead.
I was just agreeing with you.
Yeah, so that really is Toyota really looks at. They don't intentionally, like I've owned a bunch of Toyotas, I've owned a bunch of BMWs, and I swear BMW intentionally has little parts of their vehicle that rub off after 2 years, maybe 3 years. And the atypical person has a personality that's willing to pay for that type of stuff, just can't stand that stuff. They're like, we need to replace this, it's getting old. Even the car, though the car is just fine, there's not an issue with it at all. Let me know when you're done, Raghu. So there's not an issue with it, but literally these folks basically say, I'm gonna get a new car. So they put them on 3-year leases, and then they cycle those 3-year leases through. And a lot of folks out there in the industry are starting to see some shifts around the longevity of the vehicles. For instance, have you, and I'm actually going to introduce a topic that Raghu brought up earlier today that makes a ton of sense, and it plugs right into some of the economics that we've been seeing. When I say economics, that's why I'm talking about why is it that a healthcare organization or pharmaceutical organization or vaccine organization cares about economics. Why would they be at an economic ecosystem? And the real simple thing in life revolves around a simple spreadsheet like this. Down here, you have a baseline. So we're just going to kind of bolt out this baseline, okay? So this baseline gives us the ability to go down and then to go up. And this, when you go up, you start seeing the interest rates start going up over time for certain risk categories. And the thing that has always been interesting to me is, why is it that financing organizations will only finance on a certain term or a certain time frame? Well, it's because of a life cycle. Every asset has a type of life cycle. So when we look at different parts of the world that have developed out in countries, I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger so folks can see it. So when we look at different countries, what they'll end up doing is they'll literally end up saying, we're going to leverage a certain asset class or a certain future to be able to give away value. Has anybody wonder why interest rates go up or why they go down? Or maybe in the mortgage world, or maybe in what they call T-bills or treasuries. Some people say the treasuries are based out of the US. Some of them will look at like DLL or Deutsche Bank out of Britain. And a lot of this, when we dig into the history, the UK and the US have actually tied this mortgage system together. And the US is basically a debt-based society based upon consumption. So it consumes. Getting a lot of feedback.
Doesn't it come from the LIBOR rate out of England?
That's exactly right. Those LIBOR rates are based upon treasuries. Maybe Wally, it's one of the other meetings or something going on, because it doesn't look like anybody's streaming here, unless it's Raymond. That may be what it is. So
I can't see anything but me,
that's okay.
and you're in a
That's
still
okay.
screen for
It's
you.
just- it's okay. So what I'm trying to drive up a simple understanding of is you have LIBOR rates, treasury rates, and all of these things are all tied around an interest rate that get paid off of treasury that are private and public bonds. Here's an example of what they did with these bonds way back in the days. So for those that are seeing a video feed, you can basically see an example of some treasury bonds. Now, these are actually United States of America treasury bonds that you buy in a series. And what's key about them is some of them you can't actually cash within a certain period of time, but you can transfer them to other people. So you can sell them. And then they have dividends on a percentage that's paid out, whether it's up front or over arrears, but it's an instrument. Some of them are municipal bonds. Some of them are treasury bonds. Some of them are backed by land. Some of them are backed by the goodwill of nothing. But when you start understanding debits and credits, you can start understanding how there's a form of slavery that humanity is basically being pushed into. So for instance, you may have seen insurance in your particular part of the world go up like by 80%. And then when you say, hey, that's too much of a price increase, they come back and say, hey, you can actually save 15% or 20% if you will enable the ability for I'm gonna jump over here real fast. I'm just gonna try and mute you here, Raymond, and see if that stops it. So there's a simple purpose in what is the actual term? Are we talking about, what if we shifted a financial instrument on vehicles that don't just go 250,000 miles? So with that being said, I'd like to introduce Raghu, who's focused on economics for a very long time, has a brilliant, just a question, thought, comment, and it directly relates to the economics on how these new financial systems can actually be stood up. So I'll go ahead and turn the time over to him. And I won't actually pull anything up. I'll just turn it over to him.
So I'll try to give a quick summary of what real currency is based upon, and then we'll go into the car. So it just turned out that I extended my stay here in Honolulu to share our 1,000,000-mile warranty, Tesla warranty, with Mike. We didn't get a chance to talk about it, so I'll give a summary of that. And this is everything that he's talking about with my mind focused on it for 4 years. I spent about 3.5 years writing the Tesla report, which I just sent to him. So let's talk about currency. And the best way to explain currency is with the most simple and obvious question that people asked that came into play at the Depression. So you had the quote unquote Great Depression. And one day, all the factories are running, because we had the Roaring 20s. So all the factories are up and running and full steam ahead, and everybody's buying, and the economy's doing great. And literally overnight, everything shuts down. Why? Well, what's the difference between the Monday that everything was working and then the Tuesday when everything shut down? It's that the banks said, oh, we're not going to cover the cost anymore because we don't know what the value of our currency is. So why do you need a currency if you have all the same factories that have all the same materials, that have all the same workers? So all the elements were there. How is it that the banks controlled those three elements? And so this is where you get, so here's the easiest way of explaining currency. And I like to use gold coins as the example because it's very tangible in people's minds. Okay, this is what a gold coin is. And because of that, I can therefore go off to continue the business process from it. So I give the example of $100 worth of gold coins. And Mike is the bank. He has this $100 worth of gold coins. And I want to go and make 10 desks. So I go to Mike and I say, listen, can I get $100 for you? And I'm going to buy the materials, $100 worth of materials from Charles. So you say, well, listen, Raghu, I'll keep the gold coins here, but I'll give you a letter of credit. So I take this letter of credit, I give it to Charles, I get the materials, I make my 10 desks, I sell them for $200. And Charles, I'll ask you this question. I sell them for 20 bucks. I now have $200 and I take the $100 and I pay back Mike. So throughout this entire transaction, this is for you, Charles. What happened to that $100 worth of gold coins?
It stayed right in the bank and Mike is earning interest somewhere along the way from it.
So the point
And he's
is,
probably lending it out to other people too as well.
so, but,
About 10 times more.
so that what you're talking about is the side of the equation that everybody that is looking at money looks at, that everyone that talks about money looks at. What they fail to recognize is that, as you said, Charles, nothing ever happened with those gold coins. All that happened was that I went out, I added the extra value to those materials, and then I sold those. So the fact is that the gold was nothing more than a stand-in for the work that I did, because the value is never with the gold coins. The value has always been me. We're the gold. The bankers have convinced us that they own the value because they started with the gold, but actually we are the gold. And this is the beginning and end of the slavery process mentality, that they've convinced us that they have the money, they issue the bid. No, we have it. This is where the native cultures come in. The native cultures come in and start with, we are the value and the land is the value. And so how do you get me to do that $100 worth of work on those desks without the gold? That is called traditions. So traditions is the original bankers. The holy men, or rather traditions is the currency. Holy men are the bankers. And I gather that the big boys have always known this, which is the reason why they begin and start by doing, number one, crushing. What's another name for traditions? Social contracts. That's what marriage is. Marriage is the most obvious social contract. Once those traditions are removed, then the only way people will develop the conviction of trust between one another is if the gold is sitting there and the banks have all the gold. And this is the reason why the single greatest value lies with those that hold the strongest, the strongest infrastructure of traditions ready to go. And this is the greatest value that the indigenous people have to offer, and those cultures have to offer. And so this is one of the most dramatic examples that everybody can understand is marriage. And the only reason why we understand this value is because we've had the bankers go in there. We did it under their system of gold and credit. They have the gold and then they issue the credit. And so now to hire a mother costs $50,000. And that is what the cost is if you hire professionals to replace the work that an average mom provides at home. So the original kickoff to this debate of what is the value of a mother's work was a group that had come out and said it cost $507,000 if you were to hire the chef, the chauffeur, the nurse, the babysitter, etc. We put all those together, it's $500,000. And the feminist movement had gotten hold of this, and this really offended them. They really felt that this was a backdoor attempt to try to get women pregnant, married, and flat-footed in the home again. So they did their study, and this is from the 80s. And they came out that it's not $500,000. This is just absurd propaganda to try to create an artificial value to convince women to stay at home. It's quote unquote only $50,000. But in the 80s, $50,000 was the annual income for a low-end CEO, executive. So their point was that when you hire a chef for $50,000 a year, that's him working 40 hours a week. Mom's not cooking 40 hours a week. She's only cooking, 8 hours a week. So at $50,000 in the 15 to 20 years required for a mother to tend to her children, that is $2 million. Now that is the beginning value that a woman offers when she says, I will be your wife and I will take care of your children. And then the value of supporting a mother, they also have those numbers. It's another $500,000 to another $1 million. So the family unit of a mother, a wife, and a husband saying, I, Raghu Jufre, take you as my wife, and my wife says, I take you, Mr. Raghu, as my husband, and I will be the mother for your children, and I tell my wife I will be the husband to you, and I will take care of you. That single tradition alone starts at between $2 to $3 million. Now, it sounds fluffy to say that, right? Like, oh yeah, but to replace a mother cost our government, because what's happened is that because we've now have the women out of the house working, they're not there to take care of the kid, and because she's not there, the men aren't there if the family is gone. So now the government has stepped in. And so you have, just in the case of senior care, let me see, should I ask, is that Becca? Hey, Becca, are you familiar with the cost of the monthly cost for average retirement home, senior nursing home in the Big Island? You're on mute. Oh, I see. She's saying something that she can't.
Maybe ask Danielle or somebody else.
Oh, okay. What about Billy? You there, Billy?
I sure am. I'm listening away.
Yeah. So, what do you think the monthly cost is for taking care of a nursing home resident on the Big Island?
Oh, that's a good. Yeah. Right. Okay. Would it be yeah. So this would probably be what cost without profit on it. So if we looked at, I'm just guessing here. Shall we say?
If you took them to a commercial nursing home.
Yep. Okay. What? Maybe $1,500 US a week. 2,000 US?
They calculate it in weeks in New Zealand.
I see.
Private or public?
So that's $6,000 a month. So you're saying 6,000 a month?
Yeah.
Okay, it's a little bit higher. Keep going.
Wow.
Closer to 10.
A little bit more.
15,000. My microphone's working out.
Yes, $15,000 a month is the cost.
Wow.
And
That's,
they'll put
Hello,
two
man.
people in a room. That's $30,000 a month. That does not include extras. Now, the great thing about the government stepping in to cover these costs is they've now created, or even the commercial side, having capitalism go in and take care of these costs that used to be done by tradition, is they've established the market rates of the true value of what used to be done by the family and traditions. And so a single family is contributed $2 to $3 million, just
Now,
one husband, wife, and child.
Let me give some baseline here, because Raghu actually grew up in India, and in India it's very commonplace, as in other places associated with it. So India, one of the places they went to serve and then basically live is Fiji. And in Fiji and India, the family is connected. It doesn't matter if the parents are taking care of the children. Then when the children grow up, they take care of the parents. It's natural, it's normal, it's a way of life. Fast forward from where he grew up, literally in India, fast forward to Western ecosystems, and what do you see? Do you see that? Or just the opposite of
No.
it?
So to build, and that was actually the punchline to the whole thing. So the flip side of it is when the kids grow up, they take care of the parents at $15,000 a month, which is also $2 to $3 million. And now that is $6 million worth of the capitalist system now taken care of without bankers, without the currency. Because the currency is of the heart that finds its structure in traditions. So a single mother and father, husband and wife and their child or children saying, I am now yours. And the children growing up and saying, I will take care of you as I did for my mother for 3 years without pay. Hence my dental plan here. Is worth $6 million. Now, again, this sounds a little idealistic. How do you translate that? What we came up with was, hey, listen, the government is so horrifically expensive to do anything for anybody, whether it's the kids or after school or education or nursing or taking care of our, is that we'll do it at half the price. So I took care of my mom. They paid me $350 a month. It was full time. Mike remembers I couldn't come over for a day. She was in hospice, which means that they're expecting you to pass away within 2 months. And because I was taking care of her, she stayed on for 3 years. She passed away when she went into the hospital for 7 weeks, which is a different story, which wasn't entirely necessary. It's just a bureaucrat thing. But the point is that the value of the work that I did as her son was worth $15,000 a month. And everyone knows, including the nurses, which got exasperated with me. Hospice was getting exasperated with me because they knew I was extending my mother's life by years. So it's more valuable than the $15,000 that they were spending. And so because the government has gone in and taken over all of the functions that previously was served by traditions, we now know what the value those traditions offer as a financial, monetary, in a clearly defined monetary business model. And so, if we offered this program that the government that we would get credited for 50% the cost of whatever the government charges for after-school programs, for preschool programs, for taking care of our parents, for taking care of our grandparents, and the host of every other, the average household would be making $200,000 a year, and the government's expenses would be cut by 50%.
It's the same thing with schooling. Have you ever heard of a charter school where They can get a percentage of the revenues that would normally go from allocation within a state or federal budget. You see the same type of thing with schooling. Can parents actually get a certain revenue number for schooling? So some folks are lobbying that that's be the case. If you homeschool your kids or you put them in a charter school, which is like a school district inside of the system, but it's still, you still have the overhead of these systems that are being run, even though people don't want them in their systems. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Is that us? So he's talking about education, and so what's been happening is parents are getting in to it. We're beginning to recognize that in spite of the horrific pricing that these commercial and government services are charging, they are still doing a horrific job. My mom or school, and so what's the process that's already happening is that people are already beginning to intervene with their kids' education or their grandparents' retirement homes, but we've never looked at it collectively. So when you take the entire whole, we can replace the government at a cost of about $500,000 a year per family, or whatever the number is. This is the value that Native indigenous cultures bring to the table because they already have that system of family social contracts in play. Now, to talk to inflation a little bit, and then we can open it up to discussion, is that we keep talking about the government's printing of money as the cause for inflation. But assuming the government didn't print a penny more, the fact that it now costs $15,000 per grandparent, that means in a household with 2 grandparents, it's $30,000 a month. That's about $350,000 a year for just the 2 grandparents. You throw in 3 kids, it's another $20,000 a year. The preschool program, the after-school program, all those other, you got that. We can now go and identify the value of these social contracts already being offered by Native cultures. But more than that, we can also clearly identify what the cost of inflation is, because now what used to be done by the family on a budget of $30,000 or $40,000 now takes $500,000. That's the inflation. That if you want your mom taken care of, your grandma, your grandpa, your kids, your wife, and me all to be taken care of, we need $500,000 to do it. That's the inflation. And therefore, the introduction of the social contract founded in these traditions would, by its very nature, be able to reduce inflation. And that's the reason why they're so. Anyway, that's just a quick summary of the. Now and it goes off into so many other things, but I think that pretty well. Now, how did they? It's a shame Mike stepped out here because these are the punchlines, and he really should hear these because this is what he's trying to duplicate. So I'm pretty sure everybody on here has heard of the straw man, right? Where they make it all in capitals, and that is the replacement of traditions, because how else do you find, without traditions, without God, without religion, without the wise men, how else do you find the value that people are offering? It's exclusively based upon the slave labor they can do for the slave masters. That's your only value. And therefore, by introducing traditions and then quantifying them, this was the worst time for him to step out. That is where the security comes in. As-
His battery is dying. That's why he stepped out. I think he went to get his,
Oh, I see.
His
Well,
turn.
he has the other one here. He has two computers.
we're down to 5%.
Oh, I see. Oh, down to 5% here as well. Anyway, so, so here's one example of how this is the weakest of them. But if the family says, okay, you are agreeing to be the husband, you're agreeing to be the wife, then the community comes together and says, we're going to be there for you because we recognize the value. And now we have a family over here that's not going to cost society $500,000 a year. So in 20 years, that's $10 million. We're going to be able to get that down to 500, 400,000, 10% the cost. And so therefore we will provide you the jumpstart to having a home. We'll help you get to the house. We'll help you get to work. We'll help grandma. So here's another great one. The value that grandma has, right? Doing a little bit of the cleaning and a little bit of the cooking and hang on one second. So I'm giving my presentation right now. I'll listen in for a few minutes.
Good to see you. This is perfect. I can put my food in the.
So we're on the live chat.
While we're waiting for them, I can share Maui and the charter school in Maui in Kihei. It's a public school, just like any others, but I forget which crisis it was, but the teachers were going to shut down on Fridays, to save money because they couldn't pay enough for all the teachers in the regular public system. The Kihei Charter School said, forget you, we're staying open and we're taking care of our kids. They have higher quality teachers. They have higher quality. They have a waiting list of parents wanting to put their children into Kihei Charter School because of the focus it is on the children and quality of education. And they just don't have enough seats for the students. And they get less money and they have to pay for their own building than the regular schools do.
So Mike is back. I'm going to give a quick summary for him, but I just want to get to the final
I
punchline.
listened to it.
Oh, you did? Oh, okay, very good. So the final is that if we can quantify based upon the numbers of the government services that are already, we can do it at 50%, the inflation, right? Like, in other words, you'll be able to buy more services for less money because we're now providing the services. The capitalist system that they say is the best in the world is actually proven by these numbers, by this measurement, as the most extraordinarily inefficient. And when the government jumps in to do the same service, it becomes a multiple of that times 5 or 10. And so what we can say is that this so-called big cost is nothing more than the natural overinflation that you're going to get once you remove the family, indigenous, religious traditions.
And it's not overinflation.
Let me just give the punchline. The punchline is that if we can build it out, we can now give people a model. If your mom, your dad, your grandma, your husband, your wife, and your kids are willing to do this, we've just replaced the government services and the capitalist banking currency that you thought that you were dependent on. You'll be able to retract into that on pennies on the dollar. Their system falls away, leaving what? You, because you are the gold. Okay.
A lot of truths in there. And it comes back to what we were talking about numerous times around the families under attack. It's not just the individuals under attack. The families under attack. And there's many reasons why. And in the end, think about it. Inside a government and these systems, why is it an inflated dollar amount? Is it because people are really incompetent? Is it because bureaucrats have a lot of tape and process? Is it because the systems cost a lot more because they buy better materials or better vehicles or better? You know, or is there someone in the middle that's taking value out?
Yeah.
And really, that's what's happening is there's value out, and it's back to the same class distinction. And that's why a lot of these indigenous ecosystems, whether they're tribes or kingdoms, the kingdoms that I've seen are all not about an individual getting fat off of the system. It's about, especially in the Hawaiian ecosystem, because they give homage, or they give the respect and understanding to Akawa, God, whatever the different term for creator is. And literally they don't do it as though it's themselves. And I've met a lot of these individuals, and they're really wonderful people when you get to meet them and understand, whether it's, you know, Don or Leon or Edmund or Mumpy. They're really good folks that are not just in it for themselves, like what you see a lot of these systems or ecosystems doing, to take from one to give to another. But in some cases, it's, you know, it's all about land and assets. But when we talk about, you know, different ecosystems, so you've got children that talk to the parents and the parents that talk to the children, and a family unit that can come together, liken that to services, liken that to, you know, value that can be exchanged based upon people that have what's called skin in the game. So in other words, a mother is always going to be able to raise her children better than someone that replaces that mother. And that's one of the lessons that I personally learned early in life, you know, from about 9 to 16, there was an ecosystem of being a ward of the state. So I was emancipated from the state at age 16, but being inside of the system, you know, the cost that I mean, in some ways today, it's not a very big dollar amount, but back in those days, the types of dollar amounts that you were getting per child to be able to be taken care of was a lot more than what you would normally do if you were inside of a normal family. That's a perfect example of what Raghu's talking about, you know, foster services. How quick are folks, and I haven't had this in my life yet, and hopefully never do, but how quick are folks to go and get an ecosystem involved and take kids away? And then have you seen those systems where they take the kids away, not only the emotional and craziness that it's going to have on their lives and emotions and future generations, but how they just don't care about it the same way. And that's really not what we're focused on here. What we're focused on here is really this ecosystem of just straight dollars and cents, and how systems are actually created. So you've got, you know, these credits and debits, and then in some cases people pay different dollar amounts. And when you look at it, when you talk about vehicles, because we started this whole thing on vehicles, when you look at vehicles and how the costs associated with maintaining the life cycle of a vehicle looks, you're seeing vehicles, especially the electric vehicles, that are getting much more longevity out of them. So what you would normally see with, like, the vehicle that we pulled up here, where we've got, you know, 200 to 250,000 miles on average, versus something that could be, you know, let's say some of the Tesla vehicles have gone up to 1 million miles for one vehicle. So I personally, and this may not be the normal case, but I personally have a car that is 34 years old. It's a 1990 Toyota truck. And to the point of Toyota makes vehicles that they're not intentionally trying to replace them. For instance, I had a head gasket that did go out on the truck about 120,000 miles, and Toyota said this was a defect that we had put in it. Our engines should go longer than this. We're going to replace it for free. And so that vehicle now has about 400,000 miles on it, and it's an engine with, you know, the engines have tons more moving parts than the actual vehicles, where the electric vehicles, where the number of moving parts are much less. So you're seeing a lot of different systems that could do things better. And someone have to ask, well, why didn't we do electric vehicles way before this? And a lot of people, it goes to these secret combinations. It's what we've been trying to say. In the oil and gas industry, there are absolutely secret combinations that didn't want their ecosystem shifted. How oil is created, how it's refined, how vehicles are created, how they're manufactured, how they're insured, all of it. And that's why it took real difficult changes to face it head on to say, we're actually going to do this. We know that vehicles, what are you showing me?
That's the model, that's the car that went 1 million miles.
So a Model S, yeah, I've had one of those.
And this is the old models, the new models, Ken.
Well, the Model S is a great car. I mean, I had a Model S and I actually had it for 2 years and I had zero problems with it. As a matter of fact, when the remote control was going out, they saw that it was the battery was going out and they sent me a replacement battery even before I knew it was going to go out. What I'm trying to articulate here is when you start looking at longevity of vehicles, you start looking at different terms of loans. When you start looking at different terms of loans and interest rates with financial systems that are backing, you start looking at a life where you get more income that can actually be spendable. Right now, I would argue on this call, or even with friends and family, how many of you feel like it's just difficult to get monthly finances covered? And a lot of it could say, well, everything's gone up in price in the last 3 years. It's like doubled versus in some cases it's doubled. In some cases it's gone up 60, 70%, but income hasn't gone up at that same rate. And so now it's becoming much more evident that the financial numbers don't add up. What people make versus what they spend doesn't add up. If we talk about trying to pay for 2 parents at $30,000 a month inside a retirement home, it's just not feasible. People are going to figure out a different way to do it. But it really does come down to numbers. And that's why you would have an individual like this that comes out of the pharmaceutical industry being so adamant about numbers and dollars and control and inside, because it's one thing if you really, and I'll play what he's saying again, it's one thing to really understand that cash is gone. It's another thing to understand that now that it's gone, how things can be taken from you just like that. Also how it can be made as well. But a lot of it comes back to what he's talking about, what Raghu's talking about with gold. But it's really all about value and what is perceived value. For me, I don't put a lot of value in gold. I can't eat it. I can't drive it. I can't find comfort in it. I can't find warmth in it. I could care less. I don't use it in my life. But because people trust it and it's a store of value that fluctuates in a relatively non-volatile standpoint, then others would loan against it. But in all reality, if we would do 3 things, and Raghu has hit on 2 of these things in a very core way. 1, if we would produce products that are local to us, and usually products that we need in the future are not necessarily vehicles, but they're going to be food. If we grow food locally, if we buy food locally, and if we use the local currency, those 3 things are going to change the reality for future humanities. They really will. So with all of that said, I know we've kind of gone around, and I apologize, I was going to run out of power, so I had to grab a power cable. But I know we've covered a lot of territory. A lot of the updates, I haven't even gotten to any of the updates and told you what's really going on. But
You want me to give you a 5-minute of the million mile warranty?
let me bring these guys, because they're coming to see what the digital world is. Maybe you and I can go through that and then bring it up on the
This will tie
future.
everything that you were saying together about the car.
Well, yeah, if you feel it's appropriate.
So I'll try to get it down to 3 to 5 minutes. I put together, it spent over 4 years, a program called the Tesla's Million Mile Warranty. And it started off with the excitement over the Cybertruck. And what we recognized is that, and this was before Tesla started hitting 500,000 with a growing number of cars, or their one hit 1 million. With the Cybertruck, we recognized that it could probably go 1 million miles. And 1 million miles, in contrast to the other pickup trucks, which are, it runs between 3 to 5 pickup trucks to go that same 1 million miles. So right off the bat, you just cut the cost between 50 to 70%. So that's how that whole premise started. But then when we looked at it, it was like, okay, 1 million miles is what? That's 30 years. And so now you have the time value of money. I think most of us are familiar with the idea that you buy that $100,000 home. So you got it for $100,000, but 30 years later, depending on the interest rate, you've paid between $250,000 and $300,000 time value of money. So if we did the same thing with the truck, you're now getting 2 to 3 times more money for that same truck. Now with Tesla, it's the advantage because they can actually go a million, they only need to swap out the car 2 or 3 times, whereas everybody else has to swap it out between 3 to 5 times. So he has the cost advantage, but just that time value of money, it does translate for the legacy automakers at 50% debt at $500,000, as you were saying, instead of 10 years, 15 years. Now it's the exact opposite of what they do today, where they have to actually engineer things. Convalescence? Not convalescence. Where they engineer things to break down sooner. So if you add the time value of money just on the financing of it, you end up with 2 to 3 times more. But what we then discovered as we're looking at it is that the real money, once you're looking over at 30 years, is 2 to 3 times more money in the replacements than there is in the cost of the vehicle. The vehicle is now a platform, and the real money is in the upgrades. So just in the Elon Musk is just an absurd dramatization of the point that his rate of improvements is faster than all other car companies combined in history. But even Toyota, like their engine today is so much better. We gave a great example of the Toyota's, what's the #1 model that they did? I can't remember.
Camry.
No, anyway, they have 50 million of this Toyota. It's the #1 model. They have 50 million, they made 50 million, about 40 million of them are still on the road. Now, if they offered this 500,000, 500,000 mile warranty on those models, and 10% of them have to be replaced a year, that is 50 million new engines a year to keep up. 5 million new engines to keep up just with the ones that are on the road. And so what we found is that in Toyota's case, they would make 3 to 5 times more money just honoring this warranty than they are in making new vehicles. And there'd be significantly more money and less cost for them to do it. Now, I'll sort of close out on this one, and then we can get to the other things that Mike wants to get to. In Elon Musk's case with his cars, you get several factors. The first is so the money is what we call supplementals. There's 3 or 4 times more money in the supplemental services, which is the warranty, co-pays, the upgrades, etc., than there is in the cost of the vehicle, plus the time value of money. And so in the case of Tesla, we believe that he would get 7 times more money per vehicle over 30 years than the present retail price. And so that means that a $70,000 vehicle is worth $500,000 over 30 years. With the 5 million vehicles that he has on the road today, just his 5 million would generate over 30 years $2.5 trillion. An easy, simple way of saying this is that every time you sell a vehicle, the car company would now be able to credit themselves with the equivalent of 2 or 3 auto sales. And so, as good as it sounds for Tesla, the real money is actually with the legacy automakers. And our hope was to, it's not our hope, this is what we're working towards. The million mile warranty is now going to be the new standardized, the new measure of a vehicle. It either goes a million or it doesn't, and how close does it come to that? So while it's 7 times more money for Tesla, the monthly payments for us is 70% lower. So instead of $750 a month for the vehicle, it's only going to be $250. So it's like if you have a 5-year loan, it's $700. It's like your mortgage. You're getting a a $200,000 mortgage and it's only $1,200 a month, whereas if you were to pay it off in 5 years, you'd be paying $5,000 or $6,000 a month. So in summary, Tesla gets 5 to 7 times more money. We have a monthly payment that is 70% less, and the value is no longer in the sale of the services or in buying of the vehicle. The value is in the membership fee. So even though it's significantly less, they'll be able to get significantly more money as Costco and Amazon does. Their profit margin is all in the membership, not in the cost of the item. And therefore, we'd be able to bring down the cost of repairs by as much as 50 to 70%, while the automakers get significantly more money to do so. So welcome to the, so that's what I sent you. I sent you those two.
Yeah, so the simple thing that I'm hoping to try and see is inside of the digital world or whatever ecosystem there is, like the Hawaiian Kingdom, can a automobile that's turned into a digital asset actually be able to get financing that is much more competitive than in the physical world because of how information and data and identity is actually shared? So the individual can own their own identity. They don't even need to share their name. They don't need to share their credit. They basically can pick out the vehicle, and the way that they get financed because of the type of vehicle and linking it to this can actually be shared. Why do people care about this? In the future, they're going to care a lot because, for instance, we got into an Uber ride on the way here, and the driver said, before I drive, I need you to put on your seatbelt. Okay, so now you're strapped into a vehicle, strapped into a seatbelt that can be centrally controlled. And a lot of people are like, I don't care. And to be honest with you, I really don't either. You know, but the point is nowadays it's mandated that all vehicles have surveillance built into them, which means where's the vehicle? How fast is it going? How's it braking? How's it accelerating? They're starting to understand those heuristics of the vehicle, what's playing, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And then it's a matter of the actual storage of the data that's inside of that then ties to the auto manufacturers and then ties to other systems. For instance, some of these ecosystems that I've been working with in these 15-minute cities, some of the things that I've been finding is there's a lot of federal attorneys that are basically behind these FISA reports. That's a key. If you didn't just figure out what I just said, these 15-minute cities, I'm trying to understand why. And literally, a lot of the folks that are here are actually governmental-based team members. In some ways, they work these, you know, I'd call them priestcraft-based jobs because I think anybody in the legal industry is a part of that. And I can keep going into others, but they're issuing FISA requests, which is basically Microsoft, Google, Facebook, Apple. If anyone has this phone number, has this email address, they can get access to all the data. And there's automated systems behind the scenes that actually collect them and the metadata that's associated with them. So why would it matter if a vehicle actually has this type of data? Well, think about it. It's the opposite of how you bank, how you email, it's what you do when you're not doing those things. It's where you're driving, it's where you're going, it's what you're doing, it's what you're listening to, it's who you're with, it's what your conversations are. Many of us look at vehicles as a very safe place to be able to just be. I don't know about you, but some of my moments of just peace and reflection come from maybe in the shower or maybe just driving. And sometimes, I don't know about you, but I'll drive for 30 minutes and think, wow, I don't even remember that drive, but I had this concept and that thought. And
It's the only quiet time.
it's really quiet and
home's
peaceful
very
time. Yeah, it really is. And so the point that I'm trying to articulate here is the individual that can actually own their own data and their own identity, but yet transact in this world, this new digital world that touches physical assets. And the physical assets that we have are kind of like what we have over on the left here, homes or lands. And I'll even pull up some new sites so you can kind of see some of the advancements that we've accomplished. So you've seen the Hawaiian ecosystem with some of the digital assets, such as these here, right? You've also seen how it works with registration and how license plates work. That is a good example of one class of assets like vehicles and how they can actually be tied. But you still need to to put a check mark on how are they insured, how are they financed, how are they owned, how are they shared, and then how are they passed from generation to generation. And if you do that, you've got a life cycle management, not just ties to the physical, but also the digital ecosystem that the individual can actually own and control. So, we did a presentation with an organization that I believe has a very key part of where the future of the Hawaiian ecosystem is going this last week. And it was very eye-opening to see a couple different parts and pieces, which I guess until the relationship is solidified, we probably shouldn't dig through. But what I will go through is some of the advancements within ecosystems like this. So where, you've got new types of identity, and the identity can literally be owned by the user and not shared, but still at the same time, you see the value associated with it. And then when you look at certain lands and certain assets and how they tie, Raghu touched on something that I think is very imperative. He talked about how indigenous communities actually have the roots and they're connected to family. And when you start looking at environments like Tuvalu or Fiji or Samoa or Tonga, or, in some ways, I could argue that the Hopis or the Utes or just different tribes that really care about family, and in New Zealand, what Billy would say, whakapapa, those traditions of their fathers are actually being lost. And it's being lost because of what's happening in the West. These types of systems that are forcing really us to do more with, we only have 24 hours in a day. Have you ever noticed as you get older, you feel like those 24 hours are actually like 4 hours? It feels like it goes by so much faster. And a lot of it has to do with how we are actually conditioned to do certain tasks or certain processes within a lifetime. And so the goal is how do we actually come up with not just expendable finance, but expendable time where we can actually be and live the life that we were intended to live. And some people may say, well, that's just, I intend to live what I choose to live. And that's right. But are we going to be a slave to a system, to a car, to a house, to insurance, especially when they control the heuristics of the rates that are tied to them? Some of the other things that we've been able to work on this last week ties to some real organizations that I believe are adding very serious value. There's a gentleman, I won't go through his full name, but I'll just say Tom. And he's been involved with taking assets and actually helping these assets to be able to become, and we might not hear it in this browser, so I'm going to jump into a different browser. But these assets to be able to become digital assets. And it just so happens he's already done it with many different organizations and help them to capitalize their companies. And this is basically a kind of an overview of what he does with these assets. So we'll watch this real fast. You should be able to hear it. If you don't, let me know. So this organization named Dealbox really understands the digital asset world. And one of the things kind of review with you. This is a shift within the Hawaiian kingdom to what we call the Kingdom of Hawaii, and how the actual restoration of this kingdom is actually standing up in real time, and with some of the folks that we're working with. Within 2 weeks, we hope to have this live as well, which is the next step around folks that we're working with within this ecosystem. We don't have anything definitive yet, but there is a lot to be understood. There's a lot to be realized. There's a lot to be valued, if you will, and really how it just all comes together in such a way where there are people, ecosystems that are actually making a massive difference for the future. For those that have not understood Raghu and some of the things that he's worked on, his mind and his ability to just devour projects and understand the history, learn from the history, and be able to apply that to future systems. I know this may look like a simple spreadsheet, but really, I believe that the whole financial system can actually plug right into this simple thing, along with digital assets, financing, whether we're talking about municipal bonds or treasury bonds, and then insurance and how all of it works together. This is why Bitcoin was created, this one simple sheet right here. Bitcoin was created when the folks actually drove the housing industry off of a cliff because of fractional bank lending and the insurance companies blowing up. So you had insurance companies blow up, financial institutions blow up, all because the math within this credit and debit calculation sheet here didn't add up, because you didn't have the cash flow that matched the reputation of the individual. It's not the individual's name. You're going to find in the future that names really don't matter. What you do is what matters. Your reputation that is cryptographically managed matters. For instance, you will get mortgages in the future based upon providing bank login details. You don't need to provide bank statements. You don't need to provide credit reporting. You don't need to, literally, you just log into a bank and they can see how long you've banked. They can analyze your transactions. They can find mortgage payments. They can find insurance payments. They can find late payments. They can find multiple payments. They can find multiple different things, all in the data inside of your banking login. And think about
betraying you.
So there's parts of it that are betraying, like a lot of the stuff that they're currently doing. They actually keep those connections to those banks open, and they pull in the data sets into their systems where the data should reside within the banking institutions. But in a cryptographic world, an individual, you don't really, if you don't tie your real identity to these ecosystems, but you can still operate within them, that is the goal. I know today's conversation may have been confusing. It may have been deep. It may have gone through history and then things that may be personal to you around, family or life. But it really, all of these things tie together. The economics tie together. This comment that this gentleman, which I'll leave you with at the end, ties together. It's all really one fit. So we'll go ahead and convene on this. We'll see you next Tuesday at this new location. So you can plan on this being the new location. I hope you feel at home again. But thank you for taking the time. Thank you for being here. If you have any questions or thoughts or things you want to talk about before I play this, we can. I know before the meeting, there were 2 or 3 questions that were directed towards Billy. If there are any other, because we really are, it's a pleasure to have you with us, Billy, and just who you are and your heart, what you're doing down in Aotearoa is very important, especially with what, the world needs right now is leadership around what is the history taught us and how can we create a better future based upon what we've learned from the past. And can we not forget the past? Should we not forget the past? Should we learn from the past? So if there's no questions, I'll go ahead and play the video. If there are, now's the time.
Okay, I've got a question.
Go for it, Raymond.
Again, for Billy, I'm curious to know if he, and for that matter, the rest of you, know about Dr. David Martin and what he's working on in all these lawsuits. Presumably, he's being used
I
as an
personally,
expert witness.
I personally know David Martin very well. I've had many dinners with him, and I've done a bunch of events with him. But Billy,
You're just so well connected. It's too cool.
yeah, Billy, do you know David? He's been down in your neck of the woods recently. He's in Australia. You're on mute still, I think. Maybe not. I just can't. I don't see your mute sign, but I don't see you talking either.
Well, he gave me a short, brief email saying he's working on a book. Does anybody know about that?
No, but it's about time. He's got a lot of great content. I do presentations with him. That's why I end up bumping into him at different states. Like he'll do a presentation, then I'll do a presentation. So we're sharing a stage, and then we'd go to dinner or whatever else. So he's not just on the health side of things. There's also other people that were at dinner with us, the same dinners, that are very healthy Marines, wonderful people, and they're no longer alive. So it's very
The stories behind it.
Billy, I don't know what happened. Maybe you've got headphones, or maybe
I thought so.
if you log in or log out, I don't know. Yeah, throw those headphones in. Maybe it's thinking it's on your jack.
Hey, Michael, I just have a quick one. This might be for Wally, but I'm just waiting on a return that someone requested for a phone she's been waiting a couple of months now, and I was just wondering if I could send some.
I think just a text in the chat will get you where you need to be on that one. Good question though. Billy, are you with us?
Okay, am I back?
Yeah, you're back, buddy. Was it the headphones?
Wow, must have been. It's strange. Okay, never mind. I'm back. That's the main thing. So yes, very fortunate to have David's involvement with the New Zealand Citizen COVID-19 inquiry, and he basically just sent me a message saying that whatever he can do, whatever work I want to use, whatever data he's got, whatever speech he's made, I've got carte blanche access to that, which is great. But good to know that he's doing a book. I think that'll be exciting. I think the main thing about David, of course, is that of his intelligence, connectivity to the intelligence sector, having opened his mind to the actual macro approach to the control of the global population, which COVID and medical tyranny is just one link in the chain.
Absolutely.
Yeah, 100%. What I did want to mention today as well is that I am creating an international think tank with people like Senator Malcolm Roberts from Australia, Andrew Bridgeton from the UK. I'd love it, Michael, if you would consider being a part of that. And any of you guys that would like to, excuse me, more about that at some point. I'm sorry, everybody, for coughing and spluttering. I'm just getting over the man flu. And us men all know that man flu is the worst flu of all types. And so it's part of me for that. We will be posting some more information about that. Give that to Mike to disseminate amongst our family here. But Mike, you'd be a very big welcome and important part of that.
Yeah, I'd love
to.
But
I'm just excited by it. Yeah, Raghu, thank you for your presentation today as well. The more that we sort of gain insight into what our true values are, the difference between being counted as human herd capital versus our actual value, and that obviously these different aspects to value, how we value ourselves.
Which we
And
get from
so that was really
traditions.
inspiring. Thank you, Raghu. I appreciated that very
We
much.
get
Also,
we get
yeah,
that from
and also
traditions.
being reminded by Mike Yeadon exactly what's coming our way very, very quickly. Central bank digital currencies is the game changer. Out of everything, you know, in their weaponry cupboard of ordnance and weapons, probably the central bank digital currency is going to be the one that actually is the tool that they can end human freedom and our human experience as we know it. So we must either do one of a couple of things. We either ignore it, which we can't do because we're all awake to it here. Number two, try and fight it and to overcome it. Or three, sort of work within the flow of it, but to embrace the technology in other ways. And again, that's why I'm here, because of the work that Michael's doing. It's just inspirational. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me. Bless everybody.
Thank you, and appreciate just all that you do so much. Wally, did you want to speak? Do you have a hand up? No? Okay. Thank you.
Not intentionally.
Okay. Thank you for all of those that attend, and especially for those that dedicate their lives to helping with decentralization. It's a very imperative, not just concept, but truth. And I'd like to just repeat those three things before I go into this little video from this other mic. You know, if we grow local, whether that's creating something or growing it, if we buy it local, like I love the heart here in buying local Hawaiian made product, it's real. And then if we use the local currency, if we do those three things, they may sound very simple, and all of us can choose to do that. I know some people are like, I really want to get a garden, I just don't have the land to do it. But there's other parts in your region that can grow food. And if not, then you're right, supply chain needs to work. And when you back up and you start talking about how these different islands and these different indigenous environments, why they were taken over, it's because people on main lands could actually grow food and then ship it over to them. And it's that, but if they become self-sufficient again, they won't be in this form of control and slavery. And some people, like, I went to the DMV again today, and they literally, they acknowledge what's happening. Like, for real, they literally are saying, yeah, we see what's happening, but that's the law. See this piece of paper? That's the law. And, you know, we just have to create an alternative to it. It's not that we have to get frustrated with the current system, but I do believe that we really have to grow local, buy local with local currency. So here we go. Thank you for this, gentleman.
This is what we must not let them do. When we lose cash, and you've only got central bank digital currencies, the computer will know what it is you're trying to do before you even do it, and they will prevent you from doing it. If, for example, they say you can't leave your house more than 5 miles, you try and buy a bottle of water 6 miles from home, you won't be able to. I'm not kidding. That's so many reasons why you should retain cash. It's offensive that the politicians believe that they have a right to all of your information at all times.
So there you have it, folks.